Hello, everyone. I am here tonight. I'm doing a Facebook Live with my very good friend, Zach Smiley from Evolved Dog Training based out of Oklahoma City. We are going to be talking about training and living with hearing impaired dogs tonight. Zach shares his life with a couple of dogs, including Tech, who you see here, who is his own deaf dog. And I'm sure he'll be talking about Tech a little bit tonight with us. Zach and I went to the same dog training academy, the Academy for Dog Trainers. So he holds a CTC from the academy. And through his dog training business, he does one-on-one and group classes in person, but he also does remote training sessions. So if you are anywhere and would like to schedule a session with him, if you have a deaf dog and would like his assistance, he does do remote training. So no matter where you are, he can help you. I am going to toss it over to Zach and let him do a little bit of an introduction. And then we've got 10 or 11 questions that were submitted ahead of time. So we'll dive right into those. But if you have any questions that you would like to ask, you can go ahead and put those in the chat and we will definitely try to get to those. We do have a lot of questions tonight. So we are trying to keep this to about 45 minutes so that everybody has their schedule and their evening back. But we're going to get to as many questions as possible. So I will let Zach come on screen here and do a little intro and then we'll dive right in.
Hey, Kate.
Hey, everybody. Good to have you.
So as Kate said, my name is Zach Smiley. I own Evolved Dog Training. I am based out in Oklahoma City, but do take remote clients as well. And I've been training for going on 8 years. I've had Tech that entire time since he kind of sparked my journey into dog training. And yeah, I love deaf dogs and think they're amazing. And I look forward to kind of chatting about them today and answering some of y'all's questions.
Great. Awesome. We're going to put up Zach's links towards the end when we do our wrap up at the end. So all of his contact information, he's on TikTok, he's on a whole bunch of social media sites. So we will definitely put up those links so that you guys can follow him. So let's dive into some of the questions that we got ahead of time. I want to start with a really great question that came from Tafe on Facebook about how deaf dogs interact with other dogs, hearing dogs, and how you can socialize them if they're not able to hear cues and corrections and body language signals like growling from other dogs. How do you manage that when you're integrating a deaf dog into a group of dogs that is not hearing impaired?
Yeah, so it definitely can be a little bit of different. It just not much different overall, but it can be a little bit different because they can't hear those vocalizations, that some dogs give. There's no growling and things like that. Generally, most deaf dogs pick up, socialization just like regular dogs because most of the stuff is through direct body language, right? There's not too much vocalization, but definitely some dogs will go through where they're not listening to the other dog that's vocalizing and they can't hear it, so they're just thinking that this other dog is playing and they'll keep going. So really it's just about being a little bit more active and monitoring those yourself and just budging in when you need to, and doing a little consent check, pulling the deaf dog back and saying, giving him a second to see if that other dog is actually trying to stop the play or if he's actually just growling and that's a part of his play repertoire. But it's not going to be too much different. Sometimes you just have to interrupt it a little bit more often and be a little bit more on top of those interactions if they are not paying attention to the body cues and can't hear any of the growling that the other dog is putting off.
So. Yeah, that's a really good point. Do you find that you have to do more timeouts and consent checks with deaf dogs than you do with other dogs? Or is it just really more of an individual case by case?
I would say it's more case by case. Like with Tech, I definitely had to. But there's been others that, they just kind of are really good natural players, and they take the more, they don't need the vocalizations because they read the body language so well themselves that they just kind of go with the flow. But so I think it's more of an individual basis, but it is definitely, I think off the bat, I'm going to definitely be paying a little bit more attention, knowing they're deaf and that possibility is there. I would just play it safe, interrupt if you feel the need to. You want to make sure that you're comfortable too. Like we're a part of this equation as well. So if you feel uncomfortable, you feel like your dog isn't listening to the other dog, it's okay to do a consent check for yourself too.
Yep. Did you ever use drag lines early on when you're introducing and have that deaf dog on a drag line or a leash in case you need to do some separation?
Definitely. I use drag lines with hearing dogs as well. I think they're a great
Yeah.
tool. So
Yep.
having that extra 6 feet or 8 feet of line is can be very, very handy.
Yes, exactly. I use drag lines with any new dog that I'm, introducing or bringing into play. Even if I'm doing a board and train with a puppy and introducing them to my 2 known dogs, I'll have dogs on leashes. Okay, the next question that came in really dives into sort of basic training for deaf dogs and utilizing hand signals to train and how best to choose hand signals when training a deaf dog. Christina said she's just sort of been making them up. So, is there a difference? We've been trained to use hand signals before verbal cues, the way that Academy taught us to train. So we our sort of school of trainers, we preload hand signals with any dog, whether they're hearing impaired or not. But is there a difference with those hand signals for training a deaf dog versus a hearing dog?
So ultimately, for the general stuff, of course, all of my sits and downs and my stay and my that stuff is generally the same as it is with the hearing dogs, of course, in regards to the hand signals.
Mm-hmm.
There are obviously because I don't because they can't hear and there are sorry, my brain is kind of going off track.
That's okay.
But ultimately, you have to come up with more, right? So if you're teaching tricks and stuff like that, you will have to get a little bit fancy with what you're doing. And coming up with your own hand signals is perfectly fine. If you need some help, I always recommend just buying a hand signal or a sign language dictionary. So they have dictionaries that's just a whole bunch of words and every single sign, that you could have for it. So there's hundreds and hundreds of different hand signals that you can get in there and play with at that point, and you'll never run out. So,
that's such a good idea. I never thought about that. Along those same lines, we had a similar question from Vanessa on Instagram about training a marker signal for when the dog isn't looking at you. So I think first let's talk about what a marker signal is. Yeah. Or no reward mark if you're also using that, and just kind of talk about that for a little bit and then answer that question. If the dog isn't looking at you, are you using, when I was in the shelter and I worked with a deaf dog there, I was loading a pocket flashlight for signal when he wasn't looking at me. So are there alternatives to get the dog's attention when they're not paying attention to you?
Yeah. So, in regards to the marker signals, so just to kind of, like you said, touch base on what a marker is, that's basically a cue that tells the dog, hey, that was right. And you're getting paid for what you just did. And it's a way for us to be a little bit quicker when we need to be a little bit more precise in our training. And ultimately, you train that the same way you train a clicker or a verbal cue. I'm sure plenty of people are out there using those. I use a thumbs up hand signal. I know that Terry Hayward, she's another trainer that specializes with deaf dogs. Her hand signal for it is like just a flash with your hand.
Yeah.
So it's really just whatever. I personally love the thumbs up because it's so quick. I can just get it up there real fast. And even with treats in my hand, I can have treats in this hand and still do it.
Yeah,
so,
that's great.
But in regards to and what was the second half of the question?
For no reward mark, and then how to train a marker signal when the dog isn't looking at you. How do you get their attention?
So for no reward marks, I use like a little, a shaking of your fingers, and nope, that's not right. That's not it. And I do use no reward markers. They seem to, in my experience, add a lot of clarity for a lot of dogs. So I'm not afraid to use a no reward marker by any means.
Me too.
So, and then in regards to teaching them cues when they're not looking. So that's like the biggest question that people have in regards to deaf dogs, because it's pretty clear, like, obviously you can't cue them hand signals if they're not looking at you.
Right.
So tactile cues, training them to, like a little tap on their bum, just a little light tap on their bum or something on their shoulder or, something like that. You can teach them to turn around, right? And just based off of those cues. And those are always great. One thing I always remind people of too is to use your dog's peripherals. Like, so, dogs have like a nearly 270-degree view. They can view a lot wider than we can. So get your hands over in their peripherals and start waving around. It's always a good tool. But yeah, tactile stuff is good. Training them for little shakes on their collar or something like that can be, I use those with Tech all the time. They're little cues to just turn around and look at me real quick and give me
Yeah.
your attention. So definitely something that you can do.
Okay. So that's a great segue into our next question about vibration colors and using those vibration only. And we do want to be really clear here. We're not talking about shock colors. We're talking about purely vibration only colors, and what role they play in training and how to desensitize and condition the dog to be comfortable wearing them, because even, at least in my experience, even dogs that are not being shocked, that stimulation, that vibration on their neck, if it's not properly conditioned, that can still be a scary or aversive thing to some dogs.
Yeah.
So do you use a vibration collar with Tech?
Yes, so it's something that I've only recently started using. Actually, he's 8 years old, and we started using it last summer, and
Oh,
so
wow.
we went almost his entire life, and until recently. And I wanted to really give him just a little bit more, have a little bit more communication with him while he's off leash, because we do take some time off leash. So it's not a huge part of training for me. It's definitely something that you can use for a recall or for, attention. I know that some people have used it for actually as like a secondary reinforcer, like a marker, right? So the vibration itself is the marker cue that tells them they did that thing correctly.
Okay.
But like you said, vibration can be scary to dogs. It's very odd. That's not a sensation that, that is normal or something that they are at all wired to think exists. So,
Right.
it can be very scary and startling for some dogs. And so you want to be very careful about it, being thorough about conditioning them just to put it on without any sort of buzzing. And then, making sure that they can have it maybe buzz on their shoulder or something,
Mhm.
or, just having just the strap touching them while it buzzes, so they're not getting full on direct that direct vibration from it. And something you definitely want to work with a trainer on, so that you're not kind of jumping the gun and then startling your dog and
Yeah.
completely making it useless for you.
Yeah.
Because I don't recommend that you use them if your dog finds them aversive. It's
Yeah.
just not something that you want to play with. Not dice you would want to roll.
Yeah.
So
So you just recently, like you said, started using that. So do you feel like it is better as a sort of non-primary training tool to preload a baseline of training, like your hand signals and all of that communication, the tactile stuff, before you ever introduce a vibration collar? Because I feel like the few deaf dogs that I've counseled on or worked with, most owners think of that as their go-to, like, oh, he's deaf, I have to get a vibration collar, and then that's their first line of training. But it sounds like your focus is more that tactile and the hand signals and getting that baseline, and then if you want to, adding in a vibration collar as a additional training piece.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I see it, Kate. It's more of a bonus. I think you should definitely do the work without it at first. Install a normal hand signal recall for when they're looking and stuff like that. Make sure you're getting all of that solid before you gamble with something that your dog could find as aversive.
Yeah.
If you've gotten to that point and you really want that extra level of communication, which a lot of people with deaf dogs find that they don't even need it because their deaf dog is so in tune with them and they check in a lot, and
Yeah,
if you
that's great.
focus on training check-ins,
Yeah.
for a lot of dogs, you just won't need it. So,
Yep.
yeah.
And you mentioned, so you're using it for recall, and that next question that we had was tied to that, was, can deaf dogs ever truly be safely off leash in a non-fenced in area? Do you feel like that is the case, or do you feel like there's always, with any dog, I guess there's always a risk that if they're not fenced in and there's a squirrel, that even if they have an amazing recall, they're gonna potentially go after it? So do you feel like it's safe for, if you've got that solid recall training and the vibration collar trained up, do you feel like it is any less safe to have a deaf dog in a non-fenced area, or about the same as a hearing impaired dog?
So I think that it's minimal in difference, because like you said, that's what I was going to say right out the gate when I saw that question, was just that, like, generally there's going to be risk whether they can hear or not, right? So deaf dogs, they can't hear. So if you haven't, If they are beelining and they can't see you, obviously you can't call them back, but it's not that much different, I don't think. Personally, if you're willing to put in the work and the training time to have a dog that's off leash, I really do think that deaf dogs can be just as safe as non-deaf dogs off leash, or very, very close. If not, like it's got the percentages would have to be
Yeah.
somewhere, right? Like, because to have a dog off leash and generally safe anyways, it takes a lot of training. Like, you're
Right.
not going to do that with a dog if you haven't put in the time.
Right.
So if you're doing the work to train really good auto check-ins and to train a nice recall and really solid behaviors out and about with you, and yeah, I think that it's perfectly fine to have a deaf dog off leash. If you have that ability, like, I know I don't have that ability very often. All the places that I have are fenced in anyways. So,
yeah.
but otherwise I got to drive like an hour. So
yeah. Yep. Okay, good. That's really helpful. Next question came from Vanessa through Instagram about training sort of predictive cues to tell them something's coming so that they don't get startled. So if you're out on a walk and a bike is approaching and the dog obviously can't hear the wheels or can't hear a skateboard coming, is there a way to train them that anticipatory, like, hey, something's coming or someone's about to enter the house, so that we can reduce any startle or frighten that they get from not hearing someone coming up and ringing the doorbell or approaching the house?
Yeah, you definitely can train those warning cues. Obviously, something you want to hammer out with a trainer, because there's going to be, depending on the situations, you're going to want to hammer out some of those details. But, coming up with a hand signal to give them, obviously you have to be aware of the thing too. So being aware of the thing, seeing it yourself, giving them a hand signal prior to that thing coming into their view, that thing happening, and then them getting, a treat or some play or something like that afterwards to help create a positive association to that whole, that whole dot connection there.
Yeah. When I worked at the shelter and I would be out walking that dog in New York City, when I saw something that I thought he might be startled by, I would use a touch command to get him to reorient so that he was now facing the direction of that thing, so that now he sees it coming and sees it approaching. So it wasn't so much of a specific predictive cue of, oh, there's a bike approaching, but it was, we're going to do this and you're going to reorient your body, and now he sees it. So it reduced that startle effect.
Another amazing use of touch. I love touch. Yeah. It's one of my favorite
and
tricks.
A lot of times people are like, why are we doing this? Like, I'm like, it's the most, broad spectrum, easiest thing to train, and use it in so many different, situations.
No doubt,
But
no
it's
doubt.
not, when I first explain it to a lot of clients, they're like, so why would I ever want him to do that?
Yeah. And I know there's trainers out there that have trained, dogs to look in the direction that they're pointing and stuff like that. So, there are definitely things that you could do to help them, catch that before it startles them,
Right. Okay, next question came in through Facebook about teaching, and this sounds like a broad spectrum type thing, but teaching concepts of things like let's go home versus let's go to the park. And she says that her deaf dog already knows the differences between going for a walk and going somewhere in the car, but that he gets really, it sounds like frustrated because he expects immediate action after she signs the action. And so she's been struggling to teach him like the end location. Like, we're going to get in the car and we're going to the vet versus we're going to the park or something like that. Do you think that there's a way to train that, or is it important to train that, or is that just a general sort of frustration? The dog's like, okay, we're going somewhere.
I mean, you probably could if you took the time, and you're really good about your timing, and when you're pulling up to these places, you probably could teach them that, but I don't think it's worth your time, honestly.
Okay.
Because you can't signal them that you're going to the vet when you first get in the car and then take a 20-minute drive. They're not going to make that connection, right? Like, so you'd have to do it like right as you're pulling up, or and they're creating some of those signals themselves. Like, when you get on the street for the veterinarian, they know that street versus the street for the dog park.
Right.
Like, exactly. They definitely are learning those cues.
Yeah.
Whether or not it's worth it to teach them your own endpoint location cues, I don't think it's worth your time. So if you're trying to teach them that for for some specific reason, like to lower excitement or something like that while they're in the car, I think you'd be better off like just trying to teach them how to be, lay down in the car
Relax
and
in the car.
putting
Yeah.
their eggs in those baskets rather than trying to teach them, hey,
Yeah.
we're going here today. So.
That was kind of my read on that too. All right. The next question is about not quite a no reward mark, but how to best communicate no or stop doing that. And the person says, like, stop trying to chomp on the 3-legged Chihuahua specifically. So it sounds like the dog is living with another with a tripod and keeps maybe rough playing or trying to, engage with that and is sort of chomping on this poor little tripod, and how to communicate, please stop that. So I guess, how do you do timeouts with a deaf dog? When I do timeouts, I use a verbal warning cue. So how do you do that with a deaf dog?
Yeah, so timeouts are a little trickier because obviously you have to use hand signals and stuff. I don't think it's best to use like tactile cues, because if you're using, you can get really specific, but it just can get a little bit messy. So I get using still a hand signal, but you have to get in their visuals, obviously. And if they're doing something where maybe they're in the middle of playing, it's kind of hard to execute stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Ultimately though, if I'm trying to tell them no, I'm really just looking to tell them what to do instead. I'm not necessarily trying to stop them. Right. And that's pretty much like how all modern dog trainers are going to do it. They're going to find an alternative behavior for that dog to do instead. So if this dog's being wild, I'm going to somehow get his attention, whether I got to grab the drag line or whether I got to, get in his face and just like wave myself in front of him or something, I'll do that. And then I'm going to give him an alternate to do, like go to your place over here or do this touch and come away from that thing real quick and let me close the baby gate, whatever it is. I'm not going to necessarily worry about stopping the behavior as much as I'm going to worry about getting their attention and directing their energy somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. And we do that, ideally we're doing that with hearing dogs also. I have an upcoming blog post that I have scheduled for the next couple of weeks. I forget when it's coming out, that, no is not a behavior. No, we as humans are very inclined, no, stop that. No, don't do that. No, don't, and we're very no focused. And really, like you're saying, our focus should be like, okay, I don't like what you're doing and I would like you to stop that. But what can I ask you to do instead? What's a good alternative that's incompatible with the thing that I don't really want you doing? And, a lot of times people will fill out my intake form. And one of my questions is, what would you like your dog to do? And people will very often put, I want him to not do this. And okay, well, what do you want him to do instead? So we're very heavily focused on stopping unwanted behavior, which is understandable. We don't like what they're doing, but to try to reframe that into, okay, well, what do you want the dog to do instead? And that's not going to make a difference whether it's a hearing dog or a hearing impaired dog.
Yeah, I definitely want to shift that perspective. It's always what I tell my clients is this is a complete perspective shift from how most of society operates. We're looking for all the wrong stuff that we can fix when we, look for stuff that they can do and that they can get right. And if you just can't keep the no out of your vocabulary, you could train it as your actual, like a leave it cue or something if you really wanted to. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
But don't just say no and stop them. Give them some sort of direction.
Yeah. So. And with hearing dogs, when I'm talking to clients about, well, I say no. And usually as humans, when we say no, there's a tone behind it. It's a no, it's a gruff or in a sort of abrasive. We're maybe not intentionally, but we are startling the dog. We're trying to interrupt that behavior we don't want them to be doing. So we're saying no with some attitude behind it. And the dog doesn't understand our language. They don't know what no means. So maybe it works temporarily because the dog is like, oh crap, I'm startled. I was a little surprised by that. But without giving them that redirection and the thing we would like them to do instead, they're really not learning anything in that situation.
Yeah. And if you have softer dogs, that can just make it really bad. Like I have to be really careful with Nugget because he's super soft, like loud noises. He's just like, oh, I am so sorry.
Yeah.
Like what did I do?
Even, so Boo Boo, when we first got Boo Boo, she was, a semi-feral, very fearful dog. And, she is how I got to where I am now. She's exactly how I ended up going through academy, because I knew that the previous sort of forceful training methods that we used on our first dog, shoving their nose in pee and poop. That was 25 years ago. Like that was the standard then. And I knew if I tried that with her, she would just be like, oh, don't, even just slightly raising your voice, she would cower. And she was such a soft, fearful dog when we first got her. And that was what prompted me to seek out Academy and to find better, gentler ways to train dogs. And, some people don't think that because they're never intentionally saying no in a gruff voice with the intention of hurting or scaring their dog. But if you don't know that particular dog, some dogs it's going to roll right off of them, but other dogs like Nugget or Boo Boo, it's going to be really scary for them. Yep. It's just not worth taking that risk. Okay, so the next question is from me. I have my own question. So as you know, but most of the people on this live don't know. So we have 2 dogs, and our boy dog, Mr. Barbo, is 13. He turned 13 last week, and he has gone deaf this year. He's part border collie, and deafness in border collies is a pretty common thing. And he has lost most of his hearing at this point. So my question, and there was a similar question that came in on Facebook, is how to help your senior dog with gradual hearing loss. And that was the one that came in on Facebook. But my question was, is there inherently any difference between training a dog who is born deaf and a dog who loses their hearing later on in life?
Yeah, so ultimately, the mechanical side of the training is all the same. Like it's really, that's not going to change at all, in regards to, teaching them how to do a sit or how to do a down or whatever. The thing that's going to be different, obviously, is that you're not going to be able to use your verbals anymore, and so you've got to move to hand signals. So that's the way you're going to have to provide clarity for your older dog as they're losing their hearing. And we're going through it in my household right now too. My roommate has a 13-year-old Chihuahua Corgi mixed dog that is we recently really realized, like, oh yeah, he's definitely not hearing us as much as he used to. Like, he is sleeping through this right now.
Exactly. Out, completely out.
Yep. So teaching them hand signals, teaching them touch if they've never learned it, to get them to, moving around the house, because obviously with older dogs getting, a little bit more arthritic and painful when you're touching them and stuff like that too. So there's lots of all sorts of concerns that we got to worry about with older dogs. But the training side, nothing changes. It's just, you're going to have to start using hand signals. I made another note for myself on that question. What was it? Hold on.
Yeah, we did, like I said, we started training hand signals, and then we moved to verbals when I trained Barbo initially. So we've been revisiting those hand signals. But, a decade passed without us relying on them, for the first 3 years, whatever, 10 years of his life previous to going deaf, we never really needed to use them because he was verbally trained. So revisiting those, and I guess that kind of answers the Facebook question of helping your senior dog with gradual hearing loss to really just sort of, while they're still hearing, to maybe refresh those hand signals, or if you've never trained them, to, while they still have their hearing, to start pairing the verbal cue with a hand signal so that they can more easily transition into full deafness.
Yeah, and the other note that I made was, again, tactile cues, right? So teaching them that this, bump on the left leg means this, and this bump on the right leg means this, and there's a lot of variation that you can do with that too. So you can get creative with tactile cues with them.
Yeah, but like you said, also just being especially cautious in senior age. If they are a little arthritic, those tactile cues could actually be painful. So working with your vet, to make sure, and Barbo is on 2 medications for pain, and, to manage that a little bit as he's gotten older and arthritic, and, little shoulder pain and stuff like that. Okay, we have another question that was sent in ahead of time, and then I see that there's a new question in the chat, so we'll get to that. So the last one that was submitted ahead of time was from Judy on Facebook, saying she has trouble walking her deaf dog, and I believe it's a dachshund. Extreme puller, not food motivated, screams with excitement when they go out the front door for walks. I did follow up, and she said she is already using a no-pull harness. So I'm not sure that this particular issue is specifically deaf dog related, but maybe it is. Maybe, I don't know. What's your sort of take on that?
I'm with you. This just sounds like a general training issue, not necessarily a deaf dog thing.
Okay.
So It's just you need to go through some loose leash walking training with your pup. Start
Okay.
inside, make it really easy, pay him a lot for sticking with you and keeping that lead loose. But yeah, definitely nothing I would change in regards to, teaching a hearing dog versus a deaf dog in this situation. I'm sure that where she may be coming from is that, she's out and about with him and she has no way to get his attention and he's just pulling like a freight train. And, what do? Well, you start by training them to walk with you in the house first. So make it really easy, work on those skills in, low distraction environments and really, really install the foundations of that behavior. And then, gear up with some reinforcement out on the road and pay him for being good on the road too.
And leash check-ins when he looks up at you, reward those check-ins. What about, because it seems like some of her issue is getting out the front door. Would you advise like a wait queue at the front door and practice sort of nicer departures through the front door before they get outside?
Yeah, no doubt. I was actually working with my client today on that with their dogs, just sitting at the door and allowing the door to be opened without just bolting through like bowling balls. So so yeah, definitely taking some time to practice that separately, bringing it all together. And definitely good to take some time and do that. I've got a video or two, I think, on that on my TikTok, going through some baby steps on how to approximate through that process. So.
Yeah, that was actually one of my questions I was going to ask you at the end, like what sort of videos you have available of you working, with tech on some of these things like the recall and the leash check-ins and stuff. You've got stuff available online for people to check out. So we'll put up those links then. Okay, so it looks like there's a couple new questions in the chat here. So Kylene, hi, Zach and Kate. When training a recall, I personally rely a lot on noise for prompting the initial recall behavior. What prompts do you like to use for deaf dogs?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I just get crazy. I just get crazy with my body. I start acting like a goof. I literally it took a little bit of practice for myself to step outside of that embarrassment that just floods your body in those early stages of doing that. But you just got to get out there and get silly, and use food if you have to. Like, you get up their face, let them know you've got the good stuff. You've got the big bucks, and kind of letting them smell it, but not have it at the beginning, and then running away and making a big deal out of that and just acting crazy. So that's what you can do right there, of course. Right. So, yeah.
I was gonna, when you were saying you were doing that earlier, I was going to ask you, like, you do that on the street, people must look at you like you're heads. Like, what is this guy doing walking down the sidewalk, like flailing his arms around?
Yep. I get the looks for the hearing dogs too, because I have quite the eclectic voice when I'm dog training. So, people are like, that man is making those high pitched noises right now. Like, what the hell is going on?
That's amazing. Okay, looks like we have another question from Alexis, who is a new deaf dog caregiver. I find my deaf pup seems to have some anxiety around being near me, like a Velcro dog to the extreme. Do you have any recommendations for building confidence and at least some independence? He does well in his crate when left alone, but if I'm home, he will follow me room to room and be right underfoot. So yeah, I would, if he's doing great in his crate, that may, even hearing dogs, sometimes my boo-boo is a complete Velcro dog. She follows me to the bathroom. She does not have separation anxiety, but she just loves to be glued to my side. So trainings, go to place or a mat and teaching some relaxation and a downstay on that, so that you can start to create some of that distance, and working on a downstay with you, building into that plan, short departures, leaving the room and creating distance that way. Sort of tied to that other question, I'm not so sure that this is necessarily a deaf dog issue. And it happens a lot with hearing dogs also. Maybe there is some anxiety with this dog because they can't hear what's going on, that they're following that person that they feel comfortable with, for that comfort level. Maybe I'm sort of supposing here. I don't know that for sure, but that could be an assumption that I'm making.
I have no hard data to back it up, but in my experience, like, deaf dogs are definitely, like, if you're home and they know you're home and they're not like tired and trying to sleep, they're probably going to be checking out where you are,
Okay.
And that's, just, they stick around a little bit more. They got to see what's going on. And so
that's actually really interesting, because we have noticed that Barbo, we've been saying like he's getting a lot more clingy in his old age, but maybe it's tied to the deafness that
It very well could be.
I mean, he used to be kind of a loner. Like he would be off on his own kind of all the time. He would come and solicit attention when he wanted attention, but he never slept with us. He was, he'd come and check in with us, but he was pretty much off all by himself doing his own thing. And the last probably 6 months or so, which is really when the deafness has started to kick in, he's been hanging out with us, or he's been really sort of extra snuggly. Like he gets up and wants to be right next to us. And he started coming into our bedroom in the, early in the morning and kind of, hanging out there. So it's interesting observation that you're making that I hadn't sort of pieced those things together, but it's possible that he just, because of the deafness, he's just like, hey, where is everybody?
Yep. We have a couple deaf dogs in the family, and just from like some of the deaf clients that I've worked with, it's definitely something that I've seen, anecdotally. So, but it's a pretty strong anecdote that I think is there.
Yep. Judy's adding, Skywalker has separation anxiety too, follows and cries when you leave the house. Judy, I am a certified separation anxiety trainer, so my website does have a whole page on separation anxiety training and what that protocol involves. And I do, if you go to the website, and maybe John can throw this up in the chat later, on the homepage, there's a free downloads tab at the top, and I've got a couple separation anxiety free downloads available. So those might be helpful for you. And my blog has a bunch of separation anxiety specific topics. So you can go there, and there's a category that you can click on for separation anxiety and read all of those blogs. That is a separate issue than other, deaf dog specific things. A lot of dogs have separation anxiety, but that is a very difficult thing for owners and dogs to live with and go through. So I do encourage people to seek out help for that, and definitely talk to your vet about medication, because some medication can be a big part of the solution for dogs that have separation anxiety. So trying to get that dog some relief, if we can give them a little bit of anti-anxiety medication to help them get through that panic attack, that's really a good option to explore.
No doubt.
Hello, Oleg. Another question in the chat. What do you like to use tactile cues for versus visual cues?
So I'm just getting attention mostly. So just getting the dog to turn around and give me their attention. I mean, that's the only thing I've really used tactile cues for, is just to, tap them on the butt and get them to turn around and look at me. So
you're a butt tapper.
Yep.
Butt tap. Okay. So that is all of our questions, unless we've got any more in the chat here. We'll give you a couple minute or so to throw in any last minute questions. I will give a plug. Next week, I am doing another Facebook Live. This time next week, September 1st at 8 p.m. Eastern. The live is going to be on fostering rescue dogs. So if you are curious about fostering, have questions about that, we're going to be talking about that. I'm going to be hosting my friend and client, Tave, who is a foster coordinator for a New York City-based rescue. So she'll be there to answer questions from sort of the rescue perspective of why foster homes are so important and critical to their mission of saving dogs, especially if they don't have a physical shelter building that they're housing dogs in. And then I'll be there to help answer any questions about behavior issues. If you are currently fostering a dog and you have questions about your foster's behavior, certainly join us for that next Wednesday. And John is doing a great job throwing links in the chat there. Thank you very much. So if there's no other questions, I want to give Zach a chance to talk about his social media. He's big on TikTok.
Yeah.
I am not big on TikTok. I'm sorry. I haven't made the jump there, but I know that is your jam. So TikTok and Instagram and Facebook, all of that stuff.
Yeah, eventually I've got an account on YouTube. I don't have anything posted at this point, but
Okay.
eventually I will be making use of my YouTube as well. My
Okay.
main, like you said, my main bag is TikTok. I pretty much recycle most of my videos from there onto Instagram and Facebook. Obviously,
Okay.
Instagram and Facebook get some extra different stuff because of pictures and being able to have kind of static content on there and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But definitely follow me on TikTok. I'd love to have people out there. It's different. It's definitely a different vibe than Facebook and Instagram, but we're having fun and there's a good community getting built on there. So
And because I'm not on TikTok, I really don't have a good understanding of how it works.
yeah.
Is it easy for people to find, like if they wanted to seek out a video of you working on recall or working on a specific thing, like how do they find that on TikTok?
So on my page, it's not just yet. I've got to get my stuff a little more organized in regards to making it easy to find specific videos for my stuff. It's easy to find me. You just got to get on there and search at Evolve Dog Training. When you get to my page, then there's just a plethora of videos that I posted. I think I'm at like near 600 videos on there at this point.
Oh, wow.
And eventually I will get on the train that it's just a new feature that they've added where now you can make folders and you can organize your videos and stuff. So eventually I will have some stuff a little bit more organized for my how-tos that I do have posted on there. Otherwise, there's a bunch of just thoughts, talking head type stuff, is some stuff of me just having fun and some simple videos with little quick easy tips and stuff like that. So just a mixed bag of different content on there.
Great. Good. And if people want to schedule a session with you remotely, how would they do that?
Yeah, so you just go to my website here, evolvedogtraining.com, and you can go to the services page, and then it'll take you to a link to schedule a virtual consult, and we do that over Zoom.
Great. Fantastic. And all of the things that we have talked about, like conditioning, the vibration collar, working on all that stuff, you can do all of that remotely?
Yep. I'd be able to help anybody that wanted to do any conditioning like that. Or work on the basics to work towards that if that's a goal. So definitely feel free to reach out. I'd be glad to help you with that.
Great. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. This was so informative and so great to have you. I'm so excited to have you out in the dog training world. You're just such a good addition, especially in the Midwest where there's sort of a desert of good positive reinforcement trainers. So Oklahoma is so lucky to have such a skilled young trainer that is just so in touch with everything. It's just amazing to have you on board. And so I'm so happy to have you as a friend and a colleague. It's amazing to have you as such a good resource.
Well, I appreciate you having me on today. It was fun talking to you. It was fun answering some questions with people, and hopefully we'll get to do it again. So
yes, excellent. Well, thank you. And I hope that we see you again next week with TAFE, and we'll be talking about fostering. John's going to throw the link to the oh, he already did. Did he? I don't know if he did. He's going to put the event link for that fostering Facebook Live in the chat. So you can find it there. You can set a reminder to join us. Or if you have any questions that you would like to submit ahead of time, you can go to the event page and in the discussion tab, post your questions there. Otherwise, you know where to find me. So thanks for joining tonight, everyone. Have a good night. Bye.
Bye.